I want to thank you very much for the invitation to join you here today and for all of the work that you do in our community and internationally. I want to tip my hat. I know that you work very hard and certainly the impact is felt and it's also noticed. I was asked to join you today to talk about some of the challenges of being a member of provincial parliament, as well as some of the most satisfying moments that keep me going. And with politics, there are no shortage of challenges, right? There's certainly, whether they're personal, regional, provincial, there's so many political issues and so many challenges. And I wanted to highlight some of those. So it starts with the personal challenges that we have. From the time of deciding that a person's interested in politics and they want to run, you have to convince your own party that they should throw their support behind you. And really it starts at that point. And then of course there's facing the electorate once you find out that you're able to run for the party and get the nod. And there are also a lot of personal sacrifices as well. There's home life sacrifices, family, especially representing a riding like Kenora Rainy River, which is the largest riding in the province. It's the furthest away from Toronto. You look at, for traveling, it's about, well, with my infant, who's now a toddler, we're looking at about 12 hours door to door each way, twice a week. And then, you know, the 60 hours that I work in Queen's Park, Monday to Thursday, plus there's there's evening and weekend stuff, which I'm very happy to do. So there is a bit of personal sacrifice that's involved, and it's certainly challenging. And then there's also the challenge of raising a child in this in this environment, and really the pitiful access to childcare that we have in the province, and the costs, but also the accessibility. You know, it's easier to find childcare, say in Toronto, and paying, say, $231 a day. It's not cheap, right? So those are some of the challenges. And then there's the challenge that every MPP faces, which is how to best communicate with your constituents and how to hear what's going on, issues that are emerging as they're happening, and then also the challenges of letting people know the work that I'm doing, because I can be raising all the issues that you tell me are important to you, and if you don't know that I'm doing it, well, in your mind I'm doing a terrible job. So it's having that connection. And there are also some regional challenges, and sometimes, and when I want to talk about regional issues and regional challenges, sometimes we can't decide living in the Northwest what we want, and what might be good for Dryden might not be good for Kenora, and vice versa. And so navigating some of those challenges is also something that a person has to be cognizant of. I'll give an example of the travel information centers. Not to pick on any one community, but you know, with the closure of the travel information centers, I would say that the vast majority of people in the Northwest and Kenora Rainy River saw that as a bad thing. That we are quite dependent on tourism in this area, and people by and large recognize that as something that was important to have to our success and our livelihood. But there can also be competing interests. Pretty much every single community in the Northwest has their own travel information center that is run. And so in certain areas we had some challenges of, well, hang on a second, if this travel information center is going to go down, maybe we can divert some of those funds to help support our travel information center. But the problem is that may help that community, but it doesn't necessarily have an eye on helping all of the communities across northwestern Ontario. So getting everybody on side can also be a challenge, and a similar issue with policing costs. Many municipalities know how expensive it is to fund policing costs, and so much so that there was a big campaign that started essentially in the Northwest to push for some of those changes. The government did make some changes, but in their calculations hurt a couple communities. So they hurt in particular Sioux Lookout and Pickle Lake. So while Dryden and Kenora and other places may be happy to have a bit of a reprieve, it's kind of at the cost of others. And in terms of provincial issues, I'm sure that everyone can think of a few political hot potatoes in their mind that are going on right now. And one of those issues in particular is that of climate change. We have a government right now that's very aggressively pursuing climate change strategy. And I think many of us would recognize how important climate change is and how we need to act now and to make sure that we can start doing things that are going to help our planet and help us all and future generations. But some of the decisions that are made haven't necessarily been reflective of the reality that we live in northwestern Ontario. The reality is that we don't have things like public transportation, that we rely on having our individual vehicles where we have to put gas in our vehicles. And so looking at a 4.3 cent a liter increase in that, you know, is too much for a lot of people. And plus, the decision to phase out natural gas is something that has Northerners in particular quite leery about, because we all know the price of our hydro bills, right? They're through the roof, right? And they're only getting worse. And so to remove an option that's affordable like natural gas, as I said, is quite nerve-wracking for many. And then one of the other recent provincial issues that we've had, of course, is the challenge of the spring bear hunt. And again, it comes back to tourism. There's so many tourism operators that are, you know, dependent on that as a source of their income. And so just navigating some of those challenges within the province. And and that really comes down to the challenge of telling our story. I find sometimes I get ahead of myself. I'll talk to the provincial government and some of the powers that be about some of our issues, and I have to stop and take a step back and realize that a big part of my job is also education. I mean, it's sad to say, but I mean, you talk to a lot of people about where is northwestern Ontario, and their eyes kind of glaze over, and you talk about the Manitoba border a little bit, and then, oh, okay, I kind of got it, and they don't necessarily know about the 2 time zones, or you know, or just the fact that we don't have, we can't just, the Northlander, for instance, is a bit of a misnomer, right? Because the Northlander is further away from us than it is to Toronto. I mean, so we're talking about a lack of real basic infrastructure and services. So, how is everybody so far? Okay. Now I want to get to some of the most satisfying things in my job, and then I'd like to kind of in typical fashion, try to wrap up quickly so everybody doesn't glaze over and kind of go to sleep at the tables, and then you're welcome to ask me any questions that you might have. Okay. So with all of those challenges, people might wonder, well, why would you do it? I guess the short answer is probably that I'm crazy, that a lot of people who run maybe have a little bit of the crazies. No, it's certainly because I'm really compelled to give back to the community, and you know, whether the community is really local or regional, and I'm driven by my desire to see an improvement in a preservation of our way of life, and also an improvement for people and making things more affordable. So it can be really small things, honestly, that turn my day around and make me really happy. Like, you know, there are things, issues with flooding, and people might have their culvert plugged or something like that, and they have their house that's being flooded. And so being able to call up the M&R to send out the crews to clear the culvert, and the flooding stops, and that makes a huge difference in that person's life, and that's important to me. Simple other things like resolving highway signage, fighting to get access for healthcare for people and funding for people. There are services that aren't offered in Canada, and getting that prior approval. Keeping the experimental lakes open. You know, it's some of these campaigns, helping to improve highway maintenance. I really see the role of the provincial government, and many of you do, I'm sure, that it has more of a personal impact on people's lives. And so there are so many kind of wins just by raising the issues and doing the work. And you know, other things like keeping mining projects on track. Like, I think of the New Gold project in the Rainy River District. I don't know if many of you are aware, but that project was in jeopardy of completely falling apart just because of paperwork sitting on somebody's desk, and that person went on maternity leave and was replaced by another person who then went on some kind of a leave, and the paperwork just wasn't moving as it needed to. So, you know, raising that privately behind the scenes, and then, of course, raising it publicly, and then within an hour having the project approved, which is, you know, pretty big for our region. But I would say, without hesitation, the absolute most satisfying part of my job is talking to people and having them come up to me and tell me that the work that I'm doing is making an impact in their lives, a positive impact, and that that to me makes it all worth it. Knowing that you know, people, in some way, people's lives are being improved. So that's that. I don't know if I kind of answered your questions, or if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer those.
What can we do about our hydro rates?
Well, I think right now the single biggest thing that we can do is try to keep what's left of hydro public. I'm not sure if you're aware, but the government has made plans to sell off 60% of the hydro utility. They've gone ahead with 2 public offerings. There's 2 more public offerings that are left, and really we need to communicate. I think one of the biggest challenges that I didn't mention is that people can be overwhelmed, and I understand that, right? You're sitting at home, you're going to work, you're doing your day-to-day, you know, things, and the government somewhere, you know, over there is making these decisions that are having a real drastic impact on your life. And so people think, well, what am I going to do? I'm just one person. But I try to get people to realize that there is a lot of power in communicating your experience to people like me, and so I can share that with the government and also with the government. And with this issue, I think people really need to get loud. You know, we've done stand-ups. We're raising it all the time in question period in our speeches. The media has written extensively on it. We present petitions all the time, but we need people to get more involved on it. And so, that's one piece. That's one piece, and by doing that, that raises some awareness of the issue, and hopefully we'll get the government to change course.
John?
I've been in this part of the world here for pretty near 60 years, and the cleaning of the highway has been on the thing now for 30 years. Because I've been here long enough that I know, and nothing seems to happen. You think now something is going to happen?
I do. The big difference is, you're absolutely right. For about 30, 40 years, people in this area have been pushing for the twinning really hard. And so in 2009, we had recognition by both levels of government. The Prime Minister and the Premier of the day gathered along with 200 municipal leaders and said, we have the money. They've set aside the money. I've called, you know, provincially and federally just to make sure before I brought forward my motion. The money is still there. It's still earmarked for this project. So those are positive signs. Where this has kind of fallen apart is really the government hasn't, I would say, made a real genuine effort to work with some area First Nation communities on this. And I'm not blaming those First Nation communities, because I was in the communities when I saw some of the work that was going on the ground. I think any community would find it really disrespectful if the mayor and council of Dryden sat down with some representatives from the government and they said, okay, well, let's flesh out a plan. We can give you this, this, and this. We can work on this. Okay, let's agree to this. And then the next time, 6 months later, a completely new crew comes in and says, well, I don't know who the last crew was, but they really don't have any authority to speak on this issue, so we have to start all over again. You do that several times over a year, and you don't start the discussions until a year after the project's been announced formally. That creates a bit of tension with any community, and I think you can really think about what it would be like for your community as well. And so what we need is, we need the government to sit down and actually talk to the communities. One of the sticking points for one of the communities was the fact that they didn't have access to fresh water because, you know, with Shoal Lake, so they talked about Freedom Road, connecting them and having them a year-round road so that people weren't dying trying to get water in and out of the community at certain times of the year. There's movement on that. So I think we're closer now than we've ever been. We just need that government will to see this through. And that means pressure, I think. Thanks again, very much.
Well, first of all, you do make a big difference in the lives of people in Northwest Ontario, so thank you very much for that. And I know you're incredibly busy, both with your work and with your family, so thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, it's my pleasure, really.